let's get started. So we're obviously here talking about the economics of onboarding and just 30,000 foot. Excuse me. Again, Joey Connect, senior leader with Proteus. Our flagship product in this company is a platform called Engage, which of course is heavily used in onboarding. And besides that, we're also an investment company in 14 other operating companies and 50 plus more startups. So we have an extensive all B2B SaaS product kind of companies. And so we have extensive product experience with Engage and then operator experience just as investors in a lot of successful ventures. So what we're going through today is really just some of the economics of onboarding. Because a lot of the times this isn't thought through enough in corporations, especially many SaaS companies. I'll have a stat here in a little bit. They're usually off by like almost two times. That's a substantial difference there. And so we're going to kind of unpack this a little bit because it is a little bit devil in the details, of course, but it's important to effectively track this number. Now, today we're going to be mostly focusing on obviously the onboarding costs, right? One second here. Um, so we're going to be focusing on onboarding element. Now, many of you as leaders of onboarding, this is obviously going to be the number you own, right? This is your team implementation, configuration, and adoption kind of all in your ecosystem, right? And then the other side of this equation for many of you is probably CAC, customer acquisition costs, CAC, customer acquisition costs, which typically includes onboarding. So your number that we're working, if you're just specifically over implementation and adoption, your number, then that's your number. But that number also plays into the customer acquisition cost, CAC. We're not going to cover CAC today. We have other resources, excuse me, around customer acquisition costs. But typically, a true CAC, what I would call a fully loaded CAC, typically has obviously onboarding as part of it. It's high level. I'm not going to go through CAC today, but that's typically sales, marketing, and onboarding and implementation, right? So so that's usually a fully loaded CAC. Today we're just ISOing, very frankly, mostly on the onboarding and implementation and adoption, right? That side of the math, which of course would be added in to your customer acquisition costs. So for some of you, depending on your role, CRO or implementation lead, operations lead, you know your role. We have people with all different kinds of roles. Sometimes you own CAC, which includes onboarding. Sometimes they don't. So you guys know where I'm going at there. So this is a pretty important number to the organization, not pretty, a very important number to the organization. And so we're going to unpack this more and more just from the purview of the onboarding and adoption side. And then you can obviously work with your peer if you are not under the purview of the sales and marketing side of the math for a full customer acquisition costs. In most of our enterprises, we are tracking this on a monthly basis, typically in the monthly huddle with any of our product lines or companies or investments we have. And so, yeah, we look at this number a lot. And so it's very, very important to us and including the full whole CAC because based off the CAC, which includes this onboarding, we also base some other things related to just growth metrics, NRR, and other things. But you didn't sign up for NRR today. We can do another presentation, all these things with you on how this all interrelates because math is math and math is fun and math tells you how things are going, right? So, so today's goal, again, kind of priming it here to make sure everybody's on the same page here. Today we're going to be kind of onboarding. Look, onboarding. Look at that. We're not onboarding anything. Today we're going to be looking at basically just purely the onboarding costs because within there are areas of opportunity, obviously, for pretty extensive savings and other things to look at. So we're going to unpack that more here today. So appreciate your time. Fun fact again for everybody, fully recorded. Assets will be shared probably end of day today. So you don't have to take extensive notes. You can more think if you want to, but we'll start to unpack this. So how to calculate, right? So that's what we're going to be doing. Again, for many of you who are software related or product related, a lot of times this number is grossly wrong. We have seen because it doesn't take into consideration some other variables that we're going to get into, which is the second bullet point. And so we're always big about creating a baseline, kind of looking at what the baseline is, and then from there, kind of calculating out and getting more honed because you might not have purview to all the data inputs you need to really, excuse me, knock this out of the park. But you're going to do some inference and then obviously continuously get better. But um, I always like to kind of go through these because uh, don't don't get overwhelmed by trying to figure out everything round one. Like when you start getting into the labor costs, like 401k contributions, I mean, it can get pretty deep when you're doing your fully loaded ones. But again, for back of the napkin kind of stuff, you can start to do some things relatively quickly and then work with leaders to really optimize that. Okay. So don't be tough on yourself, but be consistent and always getting better at it, right? Because that's what it's about. So, okay, first thing everybody knows, this slide is in every single presentation I've ever done. It's like a permanent slide. Why it's becoming extremely costly and complicated is because of this. And many of you who obviously about 25% of our people on these webinars are repeat customers who are always either customers or also people just learning about challenges and stuff. But the underlying challenge for most corporations in the concept of onboarding is just the plethora of people involved in the process, the silos, the amount of communication, 5 to 7 stakeholders on your side, 5 to 7 stakeholders on the client side, right? And so you can start to see where the costs start to, AKA, start to build up pretty quickly, right? Which we're going to talk about here, right? So the complexity of onboarding, especially, and I'll be super candid here, when we talk about onboarding here in B2B ecosystem, most of the time I'm not talking about a $10 a month widget that people are just signing up and leveraging. Sure, we have clients like that, but a lot of our clients have more complicated solutions, mid-level pricing, to enterprise pricing, 25,000 to 6 million, kind of things of that nature, where there's just inherently more complexity and more money on the line. And let's just be honest, with just us in the room here, is the expectations are through the roof, and so meeting their expectations is extremely important. But ultimately, the underlying driver to this, the core multiplier effect, typically comes, from this kind of ecosystem and obviously environment that is present, right? So with that said, let's start to get into some of the stuff here. So we can't hide it. If you're not a big math person, we're going to try to keep it simple and continuously improve, right? So the style we like, and again, kind of getting started. And I'm going to walk through. Don't panic. This isn't like I'm not this. We don't conclude at the end of this slide because you could have just done that yourself. You could have just Googled it. But the point is, it's pretty much pretty simple, just to be honest. There's some intricacies and experiences you have, but again, you can start simple. But we're going to kind of walk through each one of these elements so that you can start to obviously build out and calculate your per cost. Now, there's some other variables to this that we're going to get into, the time to value impact and other operational overheads. There's many other pieces here, which again start to add up that people, in many cases, leaders aren't uh, optimizing the tracking against. And so some of it you're going to just do ratios, and we'll kind of unpack all this. But ultimately, it's a simple equation that we're going to kind of walk through here. And then what I'm going to do is obviously I have some role playing ones, and then I also flip it on the other side, which I don't want to tell you what I mean by flipping it, but there's costs and then there's missed opportunities or net new revenue, right? And so obviously one of the big reasons clients also leverage our services, engage, is obviously to shorten the time to value so that they're making more money faster and the clients are more satisfied, because satisfaction obviously directly is attributed to churn, clearly, and cross-selling and upselling. So we're going to kind of complete the whole circle here. All right, so let's get into each part of the equation. and then we're going to kind of go from there. So labor costs. So straight up, unless there's something pretty unique about your group, people typically are the most expensive things possible. And so there's obviously a big benefit to automation. And of course, we do a ton of automation and stuff with inside our platform, but still you have people involved. And again, we're ISOing here to the onboarding and implementation and adoption team. Okay. Nothing to do with sales or marketing. We'll talk about that if you have to on this. If the sales rep is partially leveraged in your onboarding, then put a ratio in 10%, 3%, whatever that is. So I cannot possibly know all the different people who are a part of your team, but we just start walking through this kind of conceptually, right? So, and it's going to be in that 60 to 80% range. Somebody can tell me, no, ours is 90. I get it. You guys all know what I'm getting at. But the point is, guesstimate of, what I call fake it to make it to start. You got to kind of start to figure some things out, kind of look at the members of the team on that, including yourself if you're a leader, if you're part of the actual implementation team, engineers, I mean, you name it, anybody involved actually in the process. And when you start to lay that out, you might get a little surprised with the number of people whether it's by area or by name, you might start to see this number start pile up. Now, one caveat as you start going through this too, and again, this is dealer's choice. I'm just sharing a lot of best practices. We kind of see this also bifurcated or trifurcated, which is not a word, into basically small, medium, and large clients, something like that, because or by product deployment, right? So if you have a larger product, clearly there's going to be more people involved. So it's not just a one size fits all number here. So you want to think about that as you're also thinking about the people involved. A great way, again, KISS theory, keep it simple, stupid, right? Like the KISS theory here, a lot of times just do the one that you're doing the most. So that's a midline product, just start with that one first, and let's get through that end to end, and then come back to getting more sophisticated. I'm joking, obviously, on the other sides, right? Like just don't overwhelm yourself. But the product, the offering, or the client type that is bringing you in the most revenue right now, just start with that one. Okay. Don't make this a huge project until you start to see some math in front of you where you're starting to feel pretty good about it, right? Or good in either way. Because if your number at the end is really high, well, then there's area for improvement. If it's really low, potentially the clients aren't being satisfied, or you're seeing high churn, right? So it's a thermometer, think of it. And you're gonna tweak and adjust accordingly, you know, during that process. So full circle back, it has to do with people, right? So tracking your time, you don't have to track. Some of our clients and non-clients of ours track everything down to the micro minute. That's your choice if you want to or not. But just ultimately, that's your, dealer's choice. Fully loaded hourly rates per role also, which I mean by that is you start getting into healthcare benefits, 401k matching. I mean, you want to be looking at real numbers there. So that's just a very important piece. A lot of times people just kind of do they look at their salary and then divide it by hours and somehow think that that's the cost of the person. No, not even close. So you have to make sure you're taking into consideration the full bare weight of the individual. And then if they're fractional, then you're going to use fractional, obviously, or percentages to help get that, you know, to that. And that quote I have at the bottom is just kind of for that mid-market client. Like you're going to see a lot of that 40 to 70. Again, everybody's a little bit different, but it's and we're talking in some generalities here. All right. So you got people. So people are always involved. Obviously, we're trying to be as efficient as possible with those people. And something to think about too is don't cheat. Because you don't want to be like, well, not every time do we use somebody from blank, but how, do you do 50% of the time like just don't try to over engineer it at the beginning. Kind of get your number and then use that as your baseline. What you're really doing here is just establishing some baselines so that you can start to see this over time. Plus, um, again, every leader is a little bit different. We're we share this number with everybody, like with people on our team, like internally, like you and you're like it's okay because it's about operating a world-class team and being able to communicate it, and it helps the team establish goals and win points and exciting things around it. Dealer's choice again for you as a leader, but uh, we love it, and our people love it, and so just something to think about. So we're literally on component one here, labor costs. All right. So I think you got it. You might have some of those numbers, you might not. Again, we'll be sharing this deck after it. So tools and technology costs. Again, kind of I'm going to move through this one pretty quickly because I think it's a lot easier for people to understand. Typically, there's all out costs. Like if you were using Engage from us, that would be a cost. But you also might have like fractional products that you're using. Like you're just partially using HubSpot or partially using Jira or ticket tracking. So you know what I mean? Those kinds of things. Make sure you're allocating that percentage out to you. Um, so just it's a little bit easier for people to and then of course you're going to be dividing most of all of this with how many clients were onboarded. So we assume that number at the end of it. So tools, well, oh, tools and technology costs. Yep. So anything around that, just a little inventory of that, and you should be able to get to that number relatively quickly for you. Okay. Makes sense. I think this one that one's probably the easiest just because you have invoices or you know what tools your team is using. Um, uh, Fun fact you might be asking, like, what about CRM? Like, oh, we have HubSpot, oh, we have Salesforce. We typically include that. The number of seats that you have in that for your team, we do include, in those types of things, even though potentially budget wise, your company the CRO or VP of sales is picking up the check for the CRM, basically paying for all the licenses. We do like to consider it in ours. Your choice if you do or you don't. Okay. All right. Next one, if I can move forward here. Okay. Operational overhead. So this is another kind of thing to really consider. And so you have the people, but then you also have supporting services and overhead that kind of comes into the team to running the team. So leadership, interviews, cross team meetings. I mean, you can see I'm providing you some of the areas to look at, scheduling, coordinating, all sorts of stuff. We do have, um, again, if you're running fully loaded and you want to get super micro detail, office space is included. How many desks your team has. I mean, like you can go. I mean, suits for you, whatever you want. But kind of just overall operational things. This again, you can see here I have about 20%, 10 to 20% is going to be where that lands, and it's a real cost. So we're not like making these things up. It's a real cost, and it's good to be, considered. And so you can think about obviously, like you said, like I have here, documentation, maintenance, other updates, just other things that might be going on, and it's not necessarily time on task with a customer, right? If there's additional costs around that or additional things that are other team members to your team or environmental costs, right? Like I'm saying, office space, other you have to fly your team for an on-prem meeting 3 times a year or the quarterly meetings. So you got a team of 10 and all 10 are flying into Houston. That cost obviously is related to your team. And so things like that can quite frankly add up. Uh, but you don't want to kind of shoo them to the side and say, oh, those aren't important, because that really is the cost of it. Okay. Making sense? I think so. Everybody feeling good? We're doing good here. No one's crying yet, so we're good. All right. So operational overhead, um, and then um, delay costs. So time to value impact. So the important thing here um, is kind of on the negative side. This is just kind of where the rubber starts to hit the road, not necessarily this math being injected into your costs, which we'll look at here in a second. But it's also reverse looking up. I look at the delay impact, and then I look at the revenue impact, both sides of the equation, because there are two sides of the equation. Um, for some of you on this call, um, it's even a bigger problem, because many software companies and many services now, they don't start making money until the product is fully launched and basically adopted and doing transactions, like processing transactions. Others, if you're lucky, are doing annual contracts and you've been prepaid, so it more is hurting you, not on the rev side, air quote, per se, but it's more on the cost side, which is good, then affecting your margins. If you're monthly, you're in between. Everybody follow along there? So these are important things to kind of be thinking about within the enterprise. But obviously, if the onboarding is really slow, you have increased churn. But ultimately, every single time the project is delayed by a day, you're going to start to bear additional weight of the cost, which once you see the math here in a couple of minutes, you'll be able to calculate that every day costs your organization another $400, 300, whatever it is, right? And so this is really good as coaching units for your team, because it sometimes can be perceived, oh, it's no big deal. We're only late a week or 3 days or 8 days, 12 days, whatever that is. But then you start saying, well, we have 25 clients coming onboarding, right? Everybody knows where I'm going here. The math starts to become pretty substantial pretty quick. And so you have increased costs and obviously in many cases lower revenue coming in to the organization. So the margins get depleted. Your margins get depleted pretty aggressively, affecting your year one, if whatever you want to call year one, or running 12, whatever you want to say, right? It hurts dramatically. Um, and quite frankly, that's just the math side of the equation. I know some of you have been on other presentations. It's also demoralizing to the team, right? Like your team. Well, quite frankly, both teams, right? Like, so the reality is delays affect culture of both companies, revenue, costs, and obviously the risk of churning and losing them. So it's I like to look at it on a per weekly basis. Again, these are just tools of the trade. They're not OMG fire Tiffany or Tommy kind of stuff, right? Like, just being very transparent here. If you want to roll that way, you can. That's your desired leadership. We don't typically see that. They're more barometers, because let's face it, it's the real world. Things happen, but also, um, it's the old adage. I always, for some reason, I read this a few Thanksgivings ago, and obviously it was just Thanksgiving, so I'll share it again. It's the old, you got no problem being stupid Thanksgiving week. Like, it's no big deal, hammer down, turkey, whatever. Like, I like apple pie, right? All that stuff. But it's bouncing back, right, to back on your routine. It's the bounce back that matters. So after 4 days, bounce back, right? And so that's what I mean about this too. There are going to be problems, and you don't have to get crazy on one little thing or one project or whatever. But it's always trying to bounce back to the norm, right? Get it back to within the acceptable range you have, you establish with your team. And if you take this in that mutual way, where it's not you leveraging these numbers to manage your people. These numbers are more for managing the goals for the team, including yourself, of how do we work together to achieve this together. And I think everybody on this call, no matter what role you're in the organization, understands the big difference between how you use this information, right? Because yeah, that's really the big difference. And we'll come. I got another one on this that I'll cover here, but you can start to see with some basic math. Again, not real. You start to unlock some things, and you're obviously going to find some areas of opportunity too. So here's another one: rework and escalation cost. Um, so so some of you might be like, here we go. Yep, there it is. Um, and so modeling into some of your equations, some sort of percentage of time kind of related to extensions, as you can see here. Categorically, you're going to see, yeah, 25, 30. It depends on your product, basically, just being candid. But there's still a lot more rework to the customer. Now, this rework in many cases uh, is done during the adoption phase, if that makes sense. Um, because to us, and I can send resources around this, but in onboarding, there's from a lion's share of our clientele, there's two concepts. There's implementation and then rolling it out and adoption. And in order for products to be successful, typically if you're a SaaS company or a service provider or whatever, it's not about the setup and the config. Yes, it's mission critical. It better be done right. But that's one piece. But what makes or breaks success is the adoption. And typically during adoption, like in our own model, we're heavily involved with the customer when we're deploying. So we get you configured. We're putting together obviously what we think is the best opportunity. But then once we go to market, and we're helping your company with your own onboardings, right? Your onboardings with your clients, there's always things to be found. There's always things to rework, areas of opportunity, of efficiency, things of this nature. So there is additional costs moving forward, and we build that in to our model with our clients for adoption. And what you might find is that's an area that you're missing is you're quickly configuring things and then wondering why it goes to churn land or the clients go quiet and they're not adopting and your adoption level is lower than you want. A lot of the times you're front loading all of your expense to the config and setup and not necessarily to the adoption side of the equation. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, you might be like, Joey, you're scaring me. That sounds like more cost, but with an incremental amount of more cost, you might be obviously making way more money because you're not losing the clients. You don't have churn, their expansion, right? So every client's a little bit different, but I encourage you to not look at cost as negative. What you're really looking at is making sure you're getting the ROI from the costs, right? Everybody makes sense? Like it's very, very important. Like if I you tell me it's going to cost me $1 every time, but 2 days from now or at the end of 6 months you're going to give me two back. Well, you know what I'm going to do? Go rob a bank, right? Now the off. This is recorded. I take that back, but everybody knows what I mean, right? Like you're going to find ways to do as many as you can, right? Like that's the spirit of it. So it's return on investment. It's cost is just one side. Okay. Um, yeah, the stats there again, but I personally we like to model that in to our cost so it's not a surprise at the end of the year. And then we celebrate when both sides are successful, meaning it's high adoption and the cost numbers didn't get overrun, right? So you can kind of see where there's areas for additional profiting there. Okay. Makes sense. Reworking so because this is frequently just yeah. Um, we sometimes see this kind of be, excuse me, I apologize. I've been, like I said, sick. And then I don't know if I should be doing this, but I'm drinking like my wife's Perrier, which I don't normally drink, and it's pretty bubbly. And so I think I'm having a bubble up. issue. I digress. Let me get back. But the point being, um, what was my point? Now I completely got lost. But you know what I'm getting at. Um, it's what we're seeing it sometimes in corporations is they bury that with support. So it's like, oh, we did all the configuration in their launch, but then we bury all the problems with support after it's live, and that's a dealer's choice again. You can think that one through. But okay. So this slide kind of just pretty much useless. It's just recapping everything that I have there. I'll own it. That's pretty much, but let's get into it. So just to kind of help out a little bit here. And again, we'll be sharing this out. Um, but kind of what I look at here are kind of just ways to build in some of your cost structures into the equation. Okay. So we kind of went through how you're going to get all that. And then obviously you need to know how many customers you have, right? So if you walk through this, in this use case, the cost of deploying a client is just around 4,500, give or take, right? And so kind of looking at labor, we're putting about 50 hours in. Tools, you're going to figure all that out divided by customer. This is on a per customer level, obviously, divided by 300, clearly depending on the number of customers you have. Um, I want to be clear though, super clear. Don't don't get how do I frame this? Again, we're involved personally ourselves with a lot of investments and companies and product lines in early stage companies, not mature, early stage companies, which many of you, I assume, are in early stage to mid, and then enterprise is a little bit different. That's a different beast. But in mid stage companies, in it's okay to be heavy. Well, you talk to your investors, but as an investor in a lot of companies, um, it, we lean heavy. How do I'm trying to like it's okay to show the owners that our cost right now is a little high or whatever, way high, as long as you're showing over time you're going down and the customers are getting more and more successful. There is a fallacy in growth companies that everything is about sales and spending, going out and hiring 25 sales reps, 90 sales reps, whatever, the old Scalaruski game, right? Basically, get them all on SaaS contracts and fire half of the team, right? Like everybody knows that model. It's pretty transparent. A lot of the times, though, the problem with that is that's where the bulk of your money goes as you're growing your enterprise, where onboarding it needs to be heavily considered because sales gets the client, onboarding keeps the client, right? And that's where the real money comes into play downstream, right? And so I don't want you to fret when you do this. And let's just, for argument's sake, just playing around with you guys, being very transparent. Say you come back and you're like, hey, our true onboarding cost per customer here is $4,500, and you're only charging 10 grand for the product. That's a lot in onboarding because your CAC, there's going to be more, but it depends where you're at in the growth of your enterprise, right? And more important, are these people staying with you? Are you getting smarter? And do you see a way to optimize your onboarding over the next 1 year, 2 year, 3 year period? And that you, as the onboarding leader, this is what it's about, right? So if your numbers you think high, it's okay. It has to be kind of then mapped out as to what percentage of this plus CAC, the rest of the CAC equation, does the team want to achieve? And sometimes this is improving your product. This is, like some of that stuff can kind of come into this, things less manual, obviously leveraging tools like Engage. Like there's a lot of ways you can start to attack this problem. It's not like you just look at a number and you're like, we're stuck. Does that make sense, everybody? Just trying to be extremely candid with you. Whatever number you come up with is a number. Now, what you do with it is what matters, right? And you building your strategy around that is really what matters. Okay. And again, smaller businesses just getting started or in the early growth cycle, um, because you might only have, let's say, three people on your team, but you hire two more because you're trying to grow. Well, immediately your onboarding costs go way up because you have two more and you probably haven't doubled capacity of onboardings. So right away, your numbers are going to be whack. Whack, not bad, just whack, new, right? So then how do you handle those moving forward? Again, if you have questions, put them in the comments. Can unpack these with you, more. But I don't want you to calculate a number and you're like, OMG, that's a number, and then and not understand that that also is related to your strategy if you're a leader here, and or if you're just a regular onboarding leader or implementer right now. These are important things. This is one hell of a thing to show your boss. I'll tell you that. They love you for this, right? And trying to help understand how do we create this math and metrics for our team to do it. And again, these things, they're all simple equations, but put together tell one hell of a story for you and your team. Making sense, everybody? I hope so. Hope there's some head shaking. I know it's a lunch thing. But it's simple and very, very important. So another piece, kind of flipping, it was kind of highlighted in that a little bit with the delay, but I just really try to keep things super simple. And then many of you have talked. I always say kind of the Kia, the Camry, and the Cadillac with the 21-inch rims, right? Like we'll get there. Like you can go full blown Escalade if you want, but you don't need to. A really good Kia or Camry is going to get you plenty of information to make strategic decisions, and most importantly, communicate and collaborate with your team effectively. Then you can get into, the Cadillac and then a Veyron later. Like everything can become more complicated and more dynamic, but you can do some basic things to really, next time you have a leadership meeting or a budgeting meeting, or anything like that, coming to the table with this stuff when you're laying out your plan, and then the impact of tool optimization and all this other stuff starts to really come in play when you're like, I think I could reduce our team's cost. Many of our clients reduced by 30%. It's almost getting like another member of the team, right? And so a lot of this also makes sense for your strategic vision of the enterprise, of your enterprise. So here's just a simple one. And I was talking, I hope some were reading it. So just for argument's sake, let's say the product price is $3,000 a month. Obviously, a yearly contract, 36K, mid-size kind of deal, right? Daily revenue value is obviously 3,000 divided by number of days. So it's $100 a day, right? Your onboarding costs, let's just say what we were doing there was a 4,500. I just put in this use case a 45-day period, right? And so if you want to just calculate that 5-day delay, which is typically kind of how, like, one day delay, it's like over managing. Are they going live this week or next week, right? I'm sure many of you are like, yeah, that's where we get kind of micro level, like that stuff, or are they adopting? You know what I mean? But so kind of thinking on a weekly level, and then obviously bearing the full weight. So obviously all of that is $500. So it doesn't sound like much as far as, oh, are they going live this week or next week? Well, it starts to add up pretty substantially, right? And so these cues are simple ways for you to communicate with your team on the expectations. Also, with your client, these are fair things to be talking about with your client. Not that you're like, pay me $500 more. No, but when you're doing your mutual plans and establishing the relationship for success, they want to be done also, right? Like they want to move on to their next project. And so it's a mutual interest to get this thing up and going so that they start seeing return on investment, right? Okay. And again, this deck, you'll have it. But these are just, I again try to keep them pretty simple compared to it. So rounding the bend here, a couple of things that I do for a lot of folks actually. Um, so some of you might be the leader on this call. Some of you might be an implementation leader or a team member. One of the things we do offer, just because this is complicated, because this is just one piece of, like, I'd say about 13 to 14 pieces, basically, when you kind of look for the full life cycle of onboarding and adoption of, we do kind of like team meetings to your team. So typically we meet with the leader. understand their problem, vision of where you want to go. And then we typically, that's one meeting. And then we do a 1.5 hour meeting with your team. Um, so under the guidance of your vision, I come in and we share that same vision, and then we also walk through what that looks like across all areas, from handoff to pre-mortem to mutual plans to the 120 after launch for adoption, like the whole life cycle basically of this. Because sometimes for leaders, it's easier to have more of a brainstorming session to identify maybe areas that your team is challenged with or other things. It's highly valuable to you, and then it also provides obviously a roadmap maybe for future success, for your team, including obviously math. So TTV, obviously, like costs we're going through today, and other concepts that we like to follow. So I offer that up to you. Again, the first step in it is just a meeting with me and you to understand your team, your challenges. I did 3 of these last week. Um, and just kind of helping you just between you and I, like your vision, areas of improvement, and then what do you want that team presentation to be? We customize it based on kind of what your goal is, and then it really creates healthy dialogue and opportunities for you. So I offer that out as a tool to continue learning and optimizing kind of the process on your side. Um, the other things, of course, as usual, we'll share out this deck, all the additional information. Obviously, you can book here. I'll include that in the follow up email, or my team will. Yeah, and again, if I'll be sharing out some today, but if you haven't, our insights and our recorded webinars, we've done hundreds of these, a lot of successful clients, and all sorts of good information there to help you to continue to grow. So I appreciate the time. Keep checking as we're doing these almost weekly, I think. Yep. So continue checking us out. If you have any questions, throw it into the comment, and all resources will be back out to you today. So again, right on schedule. Appreciate it, everybody. Have a good rest of your week. It's holiday season, but keep it going. And we'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks.